right, while everyone is admiring this unbelievable, beautiful, full harvest moon rising up here in the east, we are getting ready to begin, I believe it's our 4th annual Spooky Tales Along the River. This year we're calling them Haunting Tales, so that we can tell different types of stories that will give you goosebumps tonight. And we'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this beautiful park called Confluence Park, where the San Pedro Creek and the San Antonio River flow in together. And as it gets darker and the moon rises up, you'll be hearing scarier and scarier tales. And I'll be telling you more about that in just a little bit. And with that said, we also have another treat going on this evening. We are partnering up with our Texas Storytelling Association, and they're actually called the Tejas Storytelling Association. So with that partnership going on, I'm hoping more and more people will be able to see this concert tonight and hear you all as the audience. So here we go, our very first teller right here. His name is John Hale, and he's been a member of San Antonio Storytellers for a while now. He's also on our board. But more important, he's a man that believes in stories in the workplace. And tonight, you'll get to experience, I believe, a pretty cool poem to begin with. So without further ado, I'm going to be clipping this on each one of the members tonight, so every word gets to our camera, so bear with me.
This is a poem by Shel Silverstein. Sarah Sylvia Stout would not take the garbage out. She would scrub the pots, scrape the pans. She would candy the yams and spice the hams. But her dad would scream and shout, and she still would not take the garbage out. It piled up to the ceiling. Coffee grounds, potato peelings, brown bananas, rotten peas, cold cottage cheese. It filled the can, it covered the floor. It cracked the window, it blocked the door. Bacon and chicken bones, drippy ends of ice cream cones, prune pits, peach pits, orange peels, gloppy glumps of cold oatmeal, pizza crust and withered greens, soggy beans and tangerines, crust of black burned buttered toast, gristly bits of beefy roast. The garbage rolled on down the hall. It raised the roof. It broke the wall. Greasy napkins, cookie crumbs, globs of gooey bubblegum, cellophane from green bologna, rubbery, blubbery macaroni, peanut butter caked and dried, curled milk and crust of pie, moldy melons, dried up mustard, eggshells mixed with lemon custard, cold French fries and rancid meat, yellow lumps of cream of wheat. At last the garbage reached so high, it finally touched the sky. And all the neighbors moved away, and none of her friends would come to play. And finally, Sarah Sylvia Stout said, "All right, I'll take the garbage out." But then, of course, it was too late. The garbage reached across the state, from New York to the Golden Gate. And there, in the garbage, did she hate poor Sarah met her awful fate that I cannot relate right now because the hour is much too late. But children, parents, remember, Sarah stout, and always take the garbage out.
Our next storyteller, she was brought up in New York, but thank goodness it took her a while, but she finally arrived here in Texas, probably a little over 50 years ago, I'm guessing. My goodness, she got here as soon as she could. And she is a marvelous storyteller. She is also on our San Antonio Storytellers Board. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Susan Whipple, all the way from Boerne, Texas.
The story that I'm about to tell you took place in the 1920s, about 100 years ago. And it was about a young couple, a lovely young couple, who had just moved to Minneapolis. Their names were Addie and Theodore. Theodore had just landed a wonderful new job, one that would bring them a really good income, so good that they contracted with the best builder in Minneapolis to design and build them a home in the most fashionable neighborhood. It was Addie's job to go to the site every day and to check up on how everybody was doing everything. And in the evening, she and Theodore would drive to the site and she would give him a report of the day's progress. They were so excited about this house and they just couldn't wait to move into it, hopefully in a few months. But in the meantime, they rented a furnished apartment in an old, huge Victorian house. The woman who owned the house was a widow, and she needed to augment her income. And what she did was she renovated the whole house into small apartments, and that way she could manage it. Every apartment had a small kitchen, a sitting room, a very large bedroom, and a tiny bathroom. But it was all that they needed. From time to time, Addie would meet one of the other tenants in the house. It was a woman not much older than herself. And at first, they would just nod to one another as they passed by. And then they would say good morning or good evening. And finally, they introduced themselves to each other, and a friendship began between them. Addie was so glad to have a new friend. And her new friend, Martha, also was pretty glad because she was a widow and she was still grieving for her husband. She had had to sell their house when he died and she moved into the old Victorian. Well, the two women spent a lot of time together. And when Martha felt lonely and sad, and when the tears came to her eyes, Addie would put her arms around her and comfort her. And so time passed. One evening, Addie went into the bedroom to get ready for bed, and she sat down at her dressing table. She took off her earrings, she took off her necklace, but she wasn't really paying attention to what she was doing. She was thinking of the house and how quickly they might have to start ordering furniture for it. But then she got to the pin that was on her blouse, and she looked in the mirror to admire it. It was the pin that Theodore had given her when they became engaged, and it was so beautiful that she always looked at it every evening when she took it off. But when she looked into the mirror, something caught her eye at the other side of the room, and she turned to look, and there was a man sitting there. He was just sitting there calmly, looking at her while she sat at the dressing table. Well, she was very upset. She was startled, and she didn't know what. But then she realized that this man wasn't at all threatening. It was almost like he was waiting for her. Well, she turned to him and she stood up, and he rose from his chair, and they walked, both of them, to the center of the room. And as she looked at him, she realized that although he was looking at her, he didn't blink his eyes. Well, he walked ahead of her, and she followed him out through the bedroom into the rest of the apartment. And then he went to the door that led out of the apartment, and he opened it, and he walked through, and she followed him, and he turned left and went down the hall, and she followed him. Neither one said a word. They walked and walked to the end of the hallway to the other apartment, and as she looked, she realized, this is Martha's apartment. He opened the door, and then he stepped aside, allowing her to walk in ahead of him. And as she walked in, he walked over to the side and sat down in a chair. She only had to take 2 steps before she realized there was something terrible going on, for there on the carpet, right in front of her, lay her friend Martha. Her body was curled up, and her arms were out in front of her with blood flowing out of her cut wrists. She bent down quickly, and she felt for Martha's pulse in her neck and in her chest. And she could feel her heartbeat, but it was very, very faint. So she sat down right next to Martha, and she started ripping strips of cloth from her petticoat to wrap her wrists. In the meantime, Theodore had come in, because when she spotted Martha lying there, she had cried out, and he heard her yell. And he came running in, he took one look, he knew exactly what had happened, turned on his heel, and he said, I'm going for help. He left, and she began wrapping Martha's wrists. And as she was doing that, she looked around, and right next to them, practically, on the coffee table, she saw a half-empty bottle of whiskey, a drinking glass that was on its side, and a bloody, straight-edged razor. She took Martha's head into her lap when she was finished wrapping her, and when the blood flow finally stopped. And she tried to comfort her, and she said, Martha, you're going to be okay. It's going to be all right, and you're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. And just then, Theodore came back with 2 policemen, and the policeman said, the ambulance is on its way. But there was nothing much to do, and so they just waited a few minutes until they all heard the ambulance attendants pounding up the stairs. They rushed into the apartment. They took one look at the scene in front of them. They saw all the blood all over the place. They saw Martha's bound wrists, and they saw her white, ghastly face, and they got to work on her. And then when they could, they lifted her gently and put her on the stretcher and carried her down to the ambulance. What a terrible, terrible shock it was for Addie. Theodore realized that, and he took her and he comforted her, he embraced her, and he patted her. And after a while, she felt a little better with his closeness and the warmth of him. And she looked around the room, and she wanted to see the man who had led her there. He had gone to the chair that was on the other side of the room. And she looked, and there was the chair, and it was empty. He was gone. She didn't know what to do or what to think. But she did glance around the room some more, and over on the other side, there was a sideboard where Martha had had several framed pictures, including her wedding picture. Addie distanced herself from Theodore, and she slowly walked over to the sideboard. And she picked up the wedding picture, and there was Martha looking beautiful, and her husband. And as Addie looked at it, she realized that was the man who had led her to find Martha while there was still time. That was Martha's husband. He was still looking over her and watching over her. And even though he had departed the life that they had together, He was always taking care of her.
I am looking, I'm sorry you guys can't see this, but that moon is almost above the trees now. It is just as beautiful as can be. We might need a little help from you all, though. You know, I know we don't have wolves right around this area, but we do have coyotes. And maybe we can pretend that we are the coyotes. So let's just be those coyotes for a moment. This is your moment to be famous. And we're going to howl at the moon. Everybody ready? I'll try not to be too loud because of this microphone, but I want to hear you guys. In fact, I'll face this microphone just towards you all. Okay, everybody ready? Here we go. Howl! Ah, yes, awesome. Except they don't howl just once. Let's just do it a few times. Ready? Howl! Howl, 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 howl! Howl! Well, our next storyteller. She does live in San Antonio, but I'm not sure if you would know it. In fact, if you would shut your eyes when she comes up here in just a moment and just listen to her beautiful voice, she still has this wonderful accent. From Ireland. From Limerick is where she was raised, to be honest with you. And she's held on to that and her culture and everything the Irish have brought from Ireland to Texas. She's very involved with the Irish Society here in San Antonio, along with the Herbs. I'm not sure if that's the right the Herb Society. She is amazing. She's also a member of our San Antonio Storytellers Guild. And you all get an opportunity to hear how she brings the Irish culture, whether it's a hilarious tale from Ireland or a spooky tale or a sad tale from Ireland. She doubles her time now. She has a house here in San Antonio, but we don't ever get to see her anymore during the summer because she also has another home on a little island called Apple Island. And that's in County Mayo, I believe. And one of these days, I'm going to go visit her over there. And if you see her on Facebook, you'll see her beautiful house. And she even allows you all to stay in it. It's kind of a bed and breakfast. But for now, she has a spooky tale to share with us. I'd like you to raise your hands for Jane McDaniel. All right. Amber, would you like?
Thank you. I wanted to bring you a grisly, ghostly story from Ireland, but we don't have any grisly, ghostly stories. We live so much with superstition and things that go bump and thump in the night. It's part of our life. We're very superstitious. So I've looked farther afield. Wales also has Celts. And there was a king of the gypsies in the early 18th century called Charles Abrams. He was a good storyteller. Once upon a time, there was a crying house, a wailing house, where everybody cried in this house. The dog sat out in the yard and cried, the tears dripping into a puddle around him of wet. The servants walked around the house with handkerchiefs, large ones, and cried into their handkerchiefs. And the master sat upstairs in his study and cried and couldn't find any answer. One day a girl came by there. She was bedraggled, her hair was all crusty with dirt, and her skirts were ragged, and her feet were dirty, and she'd been on the road a long time, and the dog paid no heed. He just sat there, morose. And she went to the house door, and she knocked on the door, and a servant opened it. And she said, I heard there's a young man in this house who is very sad. And his father said that if a woman would come by or a girl would come by and could make him smile, she could have him as a husband, and I want to try. And the servant took her in and brought her upstairs to where the master sat in his study. row of handkerchiefs on the table, and he looked at her when she told him what she wanted, and he said, well, I'm not so sure. Fine ladies have been here, ladies who have everything except a husband, that's all they needed. There's all kinds of women have been here, and you're so young and so bedraggled. He said, but you have as much choice, as much chance as any of them, so try and bring a smile to my son's face, for he has been sad for way too long. So she went upstairs again to the 3rd floor with the servant and saw him on the end of the bed where he sat, tears running down his face, a bucket at the bottom of the bed and tears plopping into the bucket, and he looked at her, his face so sad, and she looked at him and she said, why are you crying all the while? Why are you doing this? You have a beautiful house, you have neighbors, you have servants who take care of you, you have your father who loves you. Why? And he just cried. And she said, well, I'm not going to take you out into the sunshine. I'll tell you a story, and maybe if it will bring one smile to your face, I will have done my job. If not, then I don't know what I will do. And she started to tell him a story, and it was, once upon a time, there was a girl called Anwen who lived with her mother. They were very poor. They lived in a small house. They had chickens outside. They had barely enough to eat. They had only one bed, and they slept together in that one bed. And one night, Anwen had a dream. And in the morning, when she got up, she talked to her mother, and she said, Mom, I had a dream last night, the strongest dream I've ever had. It drew me. It was about a tree that had 7 branches, and on each branch was a twig, and on each twig was one leaf, and I have to go and find that tree. I have to go and find that tree. And her mother said, well, if you've had a dream, you have to go, you have to travel. I won't stop you, but I'll tell you one thing, wise. The world is not as you think. It's not the way it is. So listen before you jump. Listen before you talk. Listen. So Anwen kissed her mother goodbye and started off to walk. And she walked and walked, looking for that house with the tree behind it with the 7 branches. And she walked a long, long time till she was very, very tired, slept in woods at night, slept under bushes. She came one day to a house that had a tree behind it with 7 branches. The sun was going down behind it, and it lit up that tree. And she looked. Outside sat an old woman on a chair, and she looked at Anwen going past, and she said to her, you look so tired, my dear. Have you come a long way? And Anwen said, yeah, I've been walking. She said, why don't you come in and have a bite to eat and something to drink? I'd be a bad person if I wouldn't invite you in. So Anwen, she went in and sat down. It was a strange house. She went into the kitchen and sat on a chair, and there was a spindly girl walking around, very, very thin, and on one side of the room was a boar, a big stinking boar, a big pig, and it was like half the room was a pigsty, and he sat there, stood there when he saw her coming, chained to the wall he was, and he snarled at her, and she sat as far away as she could in a chair by the table, and the old woman came in and she threw a spoon at the girl, the spindly girl, and said, put the kettle on, make a cup of tea. Bag of bones, lazy thing. And Anwen was quiet. And the woman said, look at my lazy daughter. She can't even make a cup of tea. She can't cook. She's no use. But Anwen sat and ate and drank. And the old woman said to her, well, you know, I could use some help around here. If you would feed the boar and sweep the floor and bring me my breakfast in the mornings, I will give you what I can. Would you stay? And Anwen, thinking about the tree, said yes. So she stayed, and the weeks and the months went by, and she got enough to eat, loads in fact, and her belly was full, and there was meat on her bones which hadn't been there before, and she felt really bad when she looked at the spindly daughter, because she would walk around silent around the house trying to put the kettle on, and the mother would throw a pot at her, or a spoon at her, or wooden things at her, and plates at her, and to make her work. And one day, quite a few weeks after, she was sweeping the floor, and she was over by the boar, when she said to herself, I don't know why I'm still here. Nothing is happening. That tree's still outside. The leaves are still out there. They haven't grown any bigger. I don't know what I'm supposed to do around here. The mother and the daughter were outside, and suddenly the boar talked to her, and he said, You, I've been waiting for you to talk to me. I've been waiting all these weeks for you to talk to me. You know this old woman, she's a witch. She spelled me. I was a young man and she spelled me. I came here looking for those 7 leaves. And I asked her if I could take them, and she spelled me into a boar. And now they're fattening me up. And in a month they're going to cut my throat and slaughter me and eat me up. And then she will do the same thing with you, because she will spell you into a sow and you will be fattened up. You have to get out of here. We have to leave here. That night, when all was dark and the old woman and her daughter slept, Anwen went outside and she picked all 7 leaves off the tree, and she came back inside quietly to the kitchen, and she touched the boar with one of the leaves, and the boar turned into a young man about her age, and he said, we have to leave, we have to leave, we have to flee. But first of all, she said, I have to do something. And she touched the broom, she touched the chair, and she touched the brush with 3 of the leaves. And then they ran as fast as they could through the woods and away, far away from that house. And it was in the morning when the old woman woke up and looked around and called, Anwen, Anwen, where are you? Where's my breakfast? And the poker said, well, I am stirring the fire. It'll be up in soon. And she turned over and went back to sleep. And then she woke up again and she said, well, Anwen, where's my breakfast? Where are you? And the brush answered, I'm brushing the floor. I'll be up in a minute. She turned over and went back to sleep. And it wasn't long before she woke up again and she said, Anwen, I'm getting hungry up here. Where's my breakfast? And the chair said, I'm coming up right now. So she lay back on her pillows and waited and waited. And then she realized something was up, and she looked out the window and saw that all 7 leaves were gone from the tree. And she ran downstairs and said to her daughter, go run after those 2. They're gone. Look, the boar is gone. You have to go look for them and bring them back here. As fast as a whisper, the girl went running through the woods after them, and Anwen could hear her, and the boy could hear them and hear her, and she took one of the leaves and she said, you be a pond and I will be a duck. She touched both of them and they turned into a pond and a duck that was swimming on the water. And when spindly woman, the daughter, stopped by the pond, she said, little duck, have you seen a young woman and a man running through here? And the duck just went quack, 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 and dipped down into the water. She went home and said to her mother, I didn't find him. All I saw was a pond with a duck. And the mother said, if you had brought me one feather off that duck, I could have had them back here. Go look for them again, fast as you can. And off she went again on those long, skinny legs, running as fast as the wind. And when heard her coming and just crashing through the underbrush, and she took another leaf and she touched him and she touched herself and she said, "You be a rose bush and I'll be a bee." And when the girl came up to the rose bush and she said, little bee, have you seen a young woman running through here with a young man?" And the bee just went buzz, buzz, buzz. She walked back home and she got to the house. And the mother said, yes, 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 did you find them? Did you find them? Where are they? Where are they? And she said, all I saw was a rose bush and a bee. I didn't see them. She said, you stupid idiot, get out there and start running again. Go on, look for them. They're out there in the woods somewhere. They can't be that fast. You are fast. And she plucked up her legs and she ran as fast as she could, and Anwen could hear her coming, and she got another of the leaves and she said, you will be an apple tree and I will be the apple. And when the girl skidded to a halt in front of the apple tree, she said, little apple, have you seen a young girl and a young man coming through the woods here? And the apple just swung on its stalk. She crawled back home. And the mother said, well? And she said, well, all I saw was an apple tree and an apple, nothing else. The mother said, if I wanted to get something done around here, I have to do it myself. I will go and look for them. And off she went as fast as the wind, and Anwen could hear her coming through the underbrush. And in spite of her age, she was a fast woman. And Anwen said to the young man, they were at a crossroads, and she said, you go this way and I'll go this way. I'll wait and you go this way and we'll meet in a week right here. Come back in 7 days. And he started running and he ran. He ran as fast as he could. And the witch came thundering down the pathway, and Anwen had the last leaf in her hand. And as the woman came close to her, she threw the leaf on the ground. And the witch tried to turn her foot, but she couldn't. She was too slow. And her foot hit the leaf, and she turned into a sow. A big, stinking sow. Meanwhile, the boy had gone home. First place he went. Straight home. And he came in the yard of the house, and the dog who was waiting there for him all the time he'd been gone ran up to him and slobbered all over his face and gave him a big kiss. And Anwen had told him, when you get home, don't let anybody, or when you get anywhere, don't let anybody kiss you, because you will forget everything. And that's what happened. Immediately he forgot everything. He forgot who he was, he forgot where he'd been, he forgot where he'd been the past months. And his father heard that he was home, and he came running down the stairs from his study and came out and put his arm around him and said, where have you been, my son? We thought you were dead. You were gone for so long. Where have you been? And the son started to cry, and he said, I don't remember. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I've been. I don't know anything. Well, a week later, Anwen was back at the crossroads. And there was nobody there. And she went home. And she got to that little house where she and her mother lived, and it was all quiet. There were no chickens in the yard, no smoke coming out of the chimney. And she went inside, and her mother was dead. And she buried her mother. And she didn't want to stay around that place anymore, full of memories and so sad. So she started to walk the roads. And she walked and walked. And very soon she was bedraggled, and her hair was a mess, and she was dirty. She slept under bushes and in between trees and in woods. She came to a village where she walked through the main street. And an old man stopped her and he said, where have you come from? And she said, from everywhere. He said, you look so hungry and so finished. Come into my house and I will give you something to eat. And she went in and sat down, and he made her tea and gave her something to eat, and she sat there and stretched her legs out. And he told her all the gossip of the village, all the gossip. About the house up on the hill, the big house which had been such a happy house, and what now everybody cried in that house. Even the gulls and the birds and the pigeons on the gutters cried. And the dog would sit in the yard crying. So Anwen went and tried her luck. And the young man on the end of the bed smiled. And he stretched out his hand, and there in his fist was the 7th leaf. And that's my story. Thank you.
And Jane, did you say that folktale was from Wales? Was that a Wales folktale?
Welsh.
Welsh folktale. Thank you so much. You're in for a treat. This next teller, he was raised in a Texas border town, must have had a blast, fantastic experiences, probably tons of friends, probably very popular, always enjoying life. Xavier Garza was raised in, tell me the town you were in. The Rio Grande city, and he must have found out pretty early that he loved to write, because he took a lot of these experiences and placed them right into books. And not only is he a fantastic writer, he's a prolific writer, he is also an unbelievable illustrator. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you, if you don't already know him, Xavier Garza.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Xavier Garza, and I'm going to read from a book that I wrote called Just One Itsy Bitsy Little Bite. And what it's about El Día de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. It's about a little boy, Joaquin, trying to eat some pan de muerto bread with his mama. But calaveras, skeletons keep showing up, and they all want just one itsy bitsy little bite of that pan de muerto bread. And it goes like this. I love pan de muerto, yells little Joaquin. He's happy because his mom has just finished making some pan de muerto bread. And no one makes pan de muerto bread like his mama. I'm glad you like pan de muerto, says his mama, because your papa, your dad, that was his favorite. Now they sit at the table, and little Joaquin is about to take a great big bite of that pan de muerto bread. But before he can take that bite, he hears the sound of someone knocking at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Well, little Joaquin, he jumps off his chair and he runs over, and he's about to open the door. The mom yells, Joaquin, don't open that door without first asking who's there. But it's too late. Little Joaquin opens the door wide open, and standing at the door is a calavera, a skeleton, wearing a great big charro hat and a charro jacket, and it yells, Ahua! And then declares, is that pan de muerto bread I smell, as it walks through the door and enters the house? Why, yes, says little Joaquin. My mom makes the best pan de muerto bread in the whole wide world. The calavera says, I believe it. It smells so good. Could I have just one itsy bitsy little bite of that pan de muerto bread? Joaquin turns to look at his mama, but his mama is not happy. The mom is like this. And Joaquin knows, any kid knows that when the mama is like that, it's not a good thing. And he says, the lady says, Señor, you barge into my house without first asking permission, and then you have the nerve to ask me for some pan de muerto bread? The calavera, feeling very embarrassed, takes off his sombrero and says, Ay, señora, I am so sorry. It's just that your pan de muerto bread smells so good that I lost all self-control. My mother, she taught me better than this. But I am willing to work for that pan de muerto bread, señora. I will sing a song for you and for your muchacho in exchange for just one itsy bitsy little bite of that pan de muerto bread. The señora looks at the calavera and says, one song for just one itsy bitsy little bite of that pan de muerto bread? That's a pretty good deal. Because we all know how much those charro songs cost. And the lady says, I agree. Now the calavera's getting ready to start singing. He goes, clearing his throat. And he's about to give a great big charro yell when suddenly, knock, knock, knock. The door is wide open. Joaquin has not closed it. And now standing at the door are two calaveras holding accordions. And they say, is that pan de muerto we smell? Why, yes, says the first calavera, it is. And not just any pan de muerto, the best pan de muerto in the whole wide world. And I'm going to get an itsy bitsy little bite because I'm going to sing a song for this señora and her fine muchacho. Can we have an itsy bitsy little bite too? Say the two calaveras. If we play our accordions, while he sings. The lady looks, the mama looks at the two calaveras. Joaquin is looking at his mama. And the mom says, that be 1, 2, 3 itsy bitsy little bites in exchange for a song with accordions? That's still a good deal. So the mom agrees. So they are getting ready to start. They're going to start to play when suddenly, knock, knock, knock. The door is still wide open, and staying at the door now are 3 calaveras. These calaveras are holding guitars in their hands, and they say, we heard what you said, señora. Can we have an itsy bitsy little bite too if we play our guitarras while he sings and they play their accordions? The mom goes, okay, let me see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 itsy bitsy little bites in exchange for a song. Starting to be not such a great deal, but I'm still okay with it. So she agrees. So they are getting ready to start when suddenly, knock, knock, knock. That door is still wide open, and now there are not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 calaveras, and they're all holding trumpets in their hands, and they say, is that pan de muerto we see on that table? And the first calavera, the singing calavera, says, it is. And I'm going to sing a song for an itsy little bite, and they're going to play their accordions, and they're going to play their guitars. Señora, could we get an itsy bitsy little bite too if we play our trumpets for you? The mom goes, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 itsy bitsy little bites in exchange for a song. This is starting not to be such a great deal. But she looks at her son who really wants that song. And she agrees. So now they're getting ready to start. But then, knock, knock, knock. They turn to look at the door that is still wide open because Joaquin has apparently never learned how to close the door. There are now 5 calaveras, and they're all wearing flamenco dresses and dancing outfits and holding maracas in their hands. And they say, we heard they're giving away free pan de muerto in this house. And the first calavera says, it's not free. You have to work for it. I'm going to sing. They're going to join me and play their accordions. They're playing their guitars. They're playing their trumpets. What can you do? Señora, we can dance in our flamenco dresses and play our maracas for you. The mom goes, okay, this is getting a little out of hand. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 itsy bitsy little bites. This is no longer a good deal. But now I really want that song. Now I need that song. And she says, it better be good. And she agrees. Now they're ready to start. The singing calavera goes, and finally begins to sing. The accordion players join in with their acordeones. The guitar players join in. So do the trumpet players. And the calaveras in their flamenco dresses and maracas begin to dance. And it's a wonderful song. The kind of song that makes you want to stand up and move. It makes you want to dance. Little Joaquin and his mama can't help it. They join in and start dancing too. But no song, no matter how great, can last forever. And finally, they reach the end of the song, and the singing calavera declares, tan tan, that's the end of the canción. Now it's time for that itsy bitsy little bite of the pan de muerto bread. And all the calaveras line up at the table. Now the singing calavera is the first one that takes the first bite. And true to his word, he gets that pan de muerto, he takes one itsy bitsy little bite. Then the next calaveras join up, the ones with the acordeones, and they take two itsy bitsy little bites that are bigger than the one that the first calavera took. And the first calavera said, I saw what you both did. Your bite was bigger than mine. I need a bigger bite just to make it fair. And so it goes with each calavera taking a bigger bite than the last, and each one demanding a bigger bite. And they take another bite and another bite till finally there is no pan de muerto left. The pan de muerto's gone, so all the calaveras gather at the door that is still open. The first calavera, the singing calavera, takes off his sombrero and declares, Señora, your boy did not lie. You truly make the best pan de muerto in the whole wide world. And it takes a bow. And then the calaveras all leave. But then little Joaquin is sad. And his mama, Joaquin, why are you so sad? Did you not love the song? The song was great, mama, but look. The calaveras, they ate all the pan de muerto. They left nothing, not even a piece big enough for a mouse. Ay, Joaquin, says his mama, do you really think I would let the calaveras eat all the pan de muerto? The mom walks over to the oven and pulls out some fresh, still warm, pan de muerto bread. One for her and one for little Joaquin. Little Joaquin is excited. He sits at the table. He's got his cup of hot chocolate ready to go. And he gets that pan de muerto and he's about to take a great big bite when suddenly he puts it down, jumps off his chair, runs over to the door. And not only does he close it, he locks it and declares, no more calaveras tonight. This pan de muerto is just for me and my mama. And he takes a great big bite and declares, the calavera was right. My mom truly does make the best pan de muerto in the whole wide world. And that's just one itsy bitsy little bite. Tan tan. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
All right, how about another hand for Javier? It's amazing. Did you see how he read his book? He told the story while he was holding it up. He is a phenomenal storyteller and a phenomenal author. Thompson has been a friend of many of our SASA members for, golly, probably at least 30 years. He's been on stage for at least 35 years. Larry is the epitome of what a Texas cowboy is.
We're coming back from intermission. Thank you very much, Sue, for your hosting and MC work. Put yourself back in time. 1850. The moon is high, just as it is now. And it's your job, all by yourself, to watch over a herd of 25 or 30 cattle that are supposedly sleeping for the night. There's other guys with you, but they're also supposedly sleeping for the night. You've got to stay awake. You've got to keep your eye on the horizon all around you. And you look in this direction, and you look in this direction. And you hear a crack of a stick, and you turn around this way. And you look back in this direction and that direction, and you look at that hillside that the moon has just risen over. And you know that thing you do when you see something but you're not sure you actually saw it? You kind of turn your head a little to the side and you squint. And right on that hilltop, with the moon just rising, you swear you see El Muerto! And you scream that so that the other men will jump up, so you'll have a witness this time. Because this isn't the first time you've seen El Muerto. You know his smell by now. You know the fiery red eyes of that Mustang. You know the figure that's perched in the saddle. And even though it's far off in the distance, you know that that rider on that Mustang does not have a head. And your scream startles the men behind you, and they sit up. And they say, "What's going on? What is it?" And you point to the hillside, and it's gone. But you swear it was there, and you're going to tell them about it for the next 2 weeks until you drive that herd into Sonora. And you're going to sit in that little dusty tavern, and you're going to tell everyone who comes in about your sighting, your second sighting of El Muerto. The flaming eyes of the Mustang, black as the blackest night. The rider perched on his back with no head. Now that time, and your report to the newspaper in Sonora was the first time anyone reported spotting the headless horseman of the Texas plains. For years after, you tell that tale, and no one believes you until one day you're strolling down a cobblestone road in San Antonio, and you see a man sitting on a box, a wooden box outside a window, talking to himself as those people do, and you hear him say, "El Muerto," and you walk over and you now share with him your tale of seeing the headless horseman. And that story begins to grow as other people see. Soldiers begin to hear the story. The Comanche begin to hear the story. The women making bread tell the story to each other. That stallion with those red fire eyes and that rider on the back with no head. The soldiers become interested. They have some time off and they have rifles. They begin to piece together where these sightings are along the rivers of Texas. And one day, in fact, they trap that headless horseman, that black stallion with the red eyes and the rider with no head. They trap it. They catch it running into a ravine, and they surround it, and they begin taking shots. But the bullets go straight through the rider as if they were shooting at paper targets. And one of them gets the idea that the horse spots water and dips his head. They rush the stallion, and they throw a blanket over his eyes, and he calms down. And it's their first close look at the headless horseman of the Texas plains. And indeed, he is a rider with no head, except that there is a head. A bleached white skull, sombrero still attached, hooked to the horn of that saddle, bouncing forever there. And that rider tied, so tight in that saddle. And they make quick work of those lashings, and they pull those dried bones and that black coat with the gold trim off, and they lay him to rest in a shallow grave. Allow that Mustang to run away. So they've solved the mystery of what it is. But they didn't solve the mystery of how it came to be. And for that, you've got to step back even earlier than 1850. You've got to step back to just after that skirmish at San Jacinto, where the Texians made their claim to Texas as a place and escorted the Mexican soldiers back across the border. And in those days, soldiers were allowed to simply lay down their arms and return home and take up their business. Now, one of those soldiers was a man named Vidal. Now, Vidal got to keep his sidearm because he was an officer, but he did in fact go back to his business before the war. And his business before the war was horse thievery. And he conscripted a few of those other soldiers, and they put together a horse thieving team, if you will. And they traipsed up and down the settlements along the rivers of Texas, and when no one was looking, they would grab horses, as many as they could, and they would take them as far away as Mississippi or Louisiana. They would take them across the river back to Mexico. They would take them west to New Mexico and the Arizona territories, leaving in their wake perhaps a village on fire, perhaps a house that had burned down, perhaps a landowner who got in their way, unceremoniously killed. And it got to be so bad that men decided Vidal had to be stopped. And the man who decided Vidal had to be stopped, well, his name was Creed Taylor. And one evening, just outside the Guadalupe settlement, right up from here, Creed Taylor, a Texas Ranger, a frontiersman, an all-around guy you want to make sure is your friend, and a man named Flores laid in wait for Vidal and his men to raid the Guadalupe settlement and steal the horses, having any idea that Flores and Taylor were waiting for that. They rounded up 20 or 25 ponies, and they headed south. Taylor and Flores began to trail them. By the time they got to the Frio River, and Vidal and his men crossed the river, Taylor and Flores picked up their friend, William Wallace, more accustomed to the name Bigfoot Wallace. The three men trailed Vidal and his team until they got all the way back around to the Nueces. They tracked and tracked. They saw that Vidal had crossed the Nueces and then begun to head back north, trying to throw them off the trail, no doubt. But as the three men crossed the Nueces, they were on a bit of a hillside, and in the distance they saw a very faint campfire light. They spread out, just the three of them, and encircled, such as it were, Vidal and his team, with their weapons already loaded. The three men laid siege to Vidal. Some of his men escaped, but Vidal was struck by a bullet as he climbed on his black stallion. Now that might have been enough for regular folk to know that he'd been hit mortally, but it wasn't enough for Taylor and Wallace. They decided a lesson needed to be given. They approached that black stallion. And Taylor pulled his bandana from his pocket and draped it across and tied it behind the ears of the stallion. And he slowly stroked the horse until it was calm. And Wallace and Flores went to either side of the horse, and they pulled leather strap from their pants, and they began to tie knots, anchoring Vidal to that saddle. They took his hands and they tied them fast on the pommel of that saddle. And though he still had a breath in his throat, Wallace reached to his back and pulled his knife. Vidal's head tumbled to the ground at their feet. His sombrero still attached. They picked it up. And Wallace just shoved it there between the tied hands and anchored it. And when it was done, Taylor removed that bandana from the horse's eyes. And Wallace pulled his pistol, carefully loaded, and fired. Bang! And that horse began to run. It ran across the plains of South Texas. Some would say until those soldiers freed him. But I would say, on a night like this, with that moon, you won't catch me out in an open prairie with a hillside. Because I don't want to look up and say, El Muerto!
A lot of drama. He did excellent. How about another hand for Larry and the lights? That was excellent.
I'm going to go ahead and bring Javier right back up here. He's going to tell a very short tale. And then right after Javier, we're going to have another fabulous teller right after him. And then, let's see, we're going to have Rick Davis, and then we'll have Mary Grace Ketner. So we have still a wonderful evening to go.
Hello, everybody. This is actually a short, very short story. I'm working on a series of books. I'm working on a book. It's going to be a series of monster nursery rhymes or kukui nursery rhymes. And one of the ones in it is called Beware of the Donkey Lady. And it goes something like this. Beware of the donkey lady if you're out late at night. Stay away from the shadows or any place that is dark. Don't lurk under bridges, for she's surely there. Beware of the donkey lady, my child. Beware, beware. For if she sees you and see you, she will grab you and drag you down to her lair. Once there, your bones she will snap. She will snap them in two. Oh, she surely will. A late night snack for the donkey lady, that's what you'll be. So beware of the donkey lady, my child, if you're out late at night, for she is on the prowl, and she is looking for children that look just like you. And that's Beware of the Donkey Lady. Dun, dun.
All right, we have our next teller coming up here. His name is Rick Davis. Now, Rick Davis is a pretty amazing man. He spent most of his time up in Austin, hook 'em horns. He went to UT and enjoyed his life there. But eventually he has moved closer to us. He is now in Seguin, along Larry Thompson is also living in Seguin. And he and Gary are both here tonight, which is marvelous. But what you really need to know about this handsome, tall man right here, he is our leader in the state of Texas for the Texas Storytelling Association. He is our president. And we are so excited. Yeah, let's give him a big hand. It's a hard job, but I know it's rewarding because truly we are trying to keep the storytelling alive here in Texas and still trying to connect to everyone around the world through all of our programs. So please do visit the TejasStorytelling.com, and you'll be able to learn everything you want to about our organization. Rick has a pretty cool tale to tell you. If you know anything about the devil, I think you should listen to this. How about a hand for Rick Davis?
All right, Rick, you buckle this?
Yes. Thank you very much, Sue. It's an honor to be here. Many years ago, in what is now South San Antonio, not very far from where we are this very night, young Hortensia and her old widowed mother lived in a two-story adobe home. A simple home that had adobe steps inside that went up to a balcony bedroom that was Hortensia's. Now that home faced the road, and across the road was a cantina. As the girl grew into her teen years, her mother grew concerned that Hortensia would be awakened at night by the music from the cantina. Like enchanted smoke, that music found its way up over the balcony through two cracked doors and into her bedroom. It filled her bedroom. The music filled her dreams. And as it was to be, one evening, Hortensia was awakened by that music. She was just 14, but she was compelled to go and open those doors on her balcony and look over and see that cantina. She could hear the pulsing music. She could hear the laughter from below. Before she realized that she had returned to her bedroom, and she put on her most beautiful starched white dress. She went back to that balcony. Her youthful impulse found her suddenly climbing over that balcony and onto the grapevine that held to the side of that home as she let herself down to the sidewalk. Her curiosity was so powerful. She could not resist, and when she reached the ground, she turned toward the cantina, but there stood her mother, with her arms crossed and her jaw jutted with determination. "Where are you going?" And Hortensia sharply spoke back, "I am going to La Cantina." Her mother warned her, "You cannot go. You do not know the ways of the night. You must not go." Hortensia just shoved her old mother aside, and she stepped down into that dusty caliche road, and she crossed that space to the cantina. And she stood in a moment in the doorway, resplendent in that beautiful full-skirted white dress. She was met with a wall of energy. The sound was so loud. She could feel the pounding of feet, hear the crisp laughter and claps of the crowd. Soon, a handsome young man came up to her and took her hand and led her out onto the dance floor. They danced and danced for what seemed like hours. But soon, in the doorway, a tall man appeared, the full moon illuminating his silhouette. He was a powerful man. He was dressed in the Spanish style, with a flat black hat and black leather pants. He strode out onto the dance floor, and he pushed aside Hortensia's young partner. He turned to her, and with a slight bow, he greeted her, and she returned his gaze. He put a powerful arm around her waist and her other hand upon her neck. All of the others left the dance floor and formed a circle. And Hortensia and the tall, dark stranger began to dance to the rhythms of the night. He snapped his fingers toward the band, and they began to play a hypnotic melody for the man in black and the girl in white. They danced and turned and twirled to the rhythm of the night. But soon, Hortensia felt herself being pulled improperly close. She tried to struggle and get away, but the stranger sunk his nails into her neck. She tried to scream, but he muffled her cries with his hand. She twisted and pulled, but she could not get away. All eyes were upon them, but she felt alone. Droplets of blood began to drip upon that pure white dress. The band soon held their instruments. The crowd stood frozen in silence because the man in black started to drag Hortensia out the door and onto the sidewalk. Soon you heard cries from the street, "She's dying! She is dying!" A priest was called, and he knelt by her. He saw her dress was shredded. Her face was clawed and scratched and badly bleeding. He looked up, and there were the faces in the door, and he asked, "What happened to this girl? What happened here?" They told him about the stranger that appeared after midnight. his trained eye looked away and saw there in the dusty Caliche Road footprints leading away from this poor girl. They had been made by cloven hoofs. The priest crossed himself and said a prayer. And then for all to hear, he said, "Es el diablo." This girl was dancing with the devil. Thank you.
That was spooky. I mean, that was spooky. I got goosebumps. Thank you so much, Rick. Actually, maybe not. I have to sleep on this now.
Now we have Mary Grace Ketner, and I'm going to have her come on up here as I'm introducing her. Mary Grace is a longtime friend of many of ours. She is the originator of the San Antonio Storytellers. So please give her a big hand. Yes. She's a radio scriptwriter, she's an author, she is a phenomenal storyteller. She's a leader to all of us when it comes to storytelling and folk tales and folk legends and fairy tales. She's amazing. She's stayed up with all this new technology and is still pushing out help to all of us when it comes to understanding what folk tales and legends really do for us, and myths, and how we can see through them and walk in their shoes as we tell those stories. Now, with that said, Mary Grace has a fabulous tale to share with you right now. How about another hand for Mary Grace Ketner? Let's see if that's any better.
Okay. Amen. Death, hour of hour, thee at and sinners us for pray. God of Mother Mary, holy Jesus, womb thy of fruit thee is blessed. Women amongst thou art blessed. Thee with his Lord, the grace of full Mary, hail. I had to do that. I'm going to tell you about La Lechuza, and if I do not say the Hail Mary prayer backwards, she will hear her name spoken. She will think she is being called, that siren, that bruja, that feathered owl woman. If she hears her name and comes to us and we look into her eyes, well, one of us will die. Not tonight, not now, but soon. Maybe you will be driving on a dark road and all of a sudden you hear scratching on the roof of your car. It will be La Lechuza tearing into your car, and she will pull you out and take you off to her lair, where she can devour you at her leisure. You might be walking alone at night and hear some whistles coming from a mesquite motte, and all of a sudden, this owl woman will swoop down and pick you up and carry you off. Perhaps you will hear a child crying, and because you are good, you will want to help. But when you go out to find that child and help it, the Lechuza may come down and carry you off. A while back, there was a family who lived in a little farmhouse just south of town. The day was getting darker. The kids were all out playing, 7 of them, and it was time for dinner. the mother called them all to come in, and here they came and sat around the table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One was missing. The youngest, Manuel. Mama asked the children, "Did you see Manuel?" Well, they hadn't, and Papa says, "I'll go and find him." He stepped out the back door and walked around. "Manuel," he called, "Manolito, ¿dónde estás?" He walked all the way around the house. "Manuel, Manuel." Back in the yard, he went back toward that mesquite moth that was behind their house and called out, "Manuel, Manuel, ¿dónde estás?" Well, it was actually too dark for him to search much. He went back into the house. Maybe Manuel had returned on his own. But when he stepped inside, no, the chair was still empty. He thought, maybe he'll return in the morning. And he went back to the door and he looked out just one more time, and he saw rising out of that mesquite moth an owl, large as a woman. And she had something in her talons. He didn't know why, but for some reason the thought went through his head that, could that be my son? No, an owl could never lift a 30-pound child. He went to the table and he told the kids, we'll look again in the morning. He probably just fell asleep somewhere, and he may wander back by his own. But we'll look tomorrow when light comes. And yet all night long, he couldn't help thinking about that owl and that bundle or whatever it was that she was carrying. Well, the next morning, they went out and looked, and they searched all day and found nothing. The neighbors came and helped, but they never found Manuelito. And then one night, Papa heard a voice, a child crying, and he went and looked in the bedroom where the children were, but no, they were all asleep. And then from there, he could tell that the voice was coming from outside the window. Quickly, he went back and pulled on his jeans, and he went outside and he looked around. "Manuel, Manuelito, Manolito, come in. Come and find me. I'm your papa." And nothing answered. No one answered. And then he heard from the distance, "Papa, Papa." He ran toward the voice. "Manuelito, where are you?" "Papa, Papa," the voice said. It was coming from the mesquite moth. Papa started tearing into the mesquite moth, ignoring the thorns and the stiff branches that were scraping up against him. "Manolito, Manolito, Papa, Papa." Well, all this ruckus awoke Mama. She went to the back door and she looked out. And she heard the voices of her husband and her child. And as she watched, she saw a great owl rising up out of that mesquite moth. An owl the size of the woman, ghostly white and pale, working very hard to lift herself out of the sky because in her talons she carried something. Mama couldn't tell, it was too dark, but she was carrying something, and for some reason the thought went through her head, could that be my husband? No, an owl couldn't carry a grown woman. But her husband did not come back. The next day they looked for him. The neighbors helped. They looked all over and they never found him. About a year later, the family moved out of that house they moved to a part on the west side of town, and she told the neighbors that her husband and son had been carried away by an owl. Some people didn't believe her, but some people knew about the lechuza, and they knew it might be true. And people who drive by that house, they say that if you look in the windows, you can see the glowing yellow eyes of owls. And every once in a while, someone will see an owl rise from the mesquite motte behind the house. Amen. Hour of hour thee at, and sinners us for pray. God of Mother Mary, holy Jesus, womb thy of fruit thee is blessed, and women among thou art blessed, thee with his Lord. The grace of full Mary, hail.
Spooky Tales, thank you so much. I want to remind everyone that we are the San Antonio Storytellers. We do have a donation jar sitting over there, all by itself, by a jack-o'-lantern that keeps falling off. Pretty pathetic. So if you feel like this was worthy, which we know it is, stories are so worthy, feel free to put in a donation over there. And then just a few steps away is Xavier Garza with his books. Please take home a book tonight. And then we also have his handsome son, who's so talented. I'm going to have Vincent come back up here and play a little bit. And if I could have the storytellers come back up for a picture, that would be amazing. It is a full moon tonight. You get to go home with all of these stories. And I hope you all have a good night sleep. Happy Halloween, everybody.